how did we get connected to Cuba in the first place?
Oh, that's me, I guess. Well, we were at Christian Adventure Camp,
Mm-hmm.
and one of Roxy's high school buddies is a preacher over in Shreveport. And so he was talking about going to Cuba, and my ears perked up. I said, Cuba? How'd you get to Cuba? And he said, well, you can go with a mission team. And he said, in fact, we're going in 13. They were going to go. And I said, gosh, sign me up. And then I looked at Roxy, and she said, yeah, you can go. So, okay. So we're going. And so I called this guy named Mark Martin. He says, man, I don't have any room on this team, and we can only take so many, but I'll put you on the 14 list. I said, great. So he called, and he says, I've got room for one more. Do you have anybody? So I immediately thought of Scott Farquhar. And so Scott said, yeah, I need to go. This would be good. So the two of us signed up, and we take off, and we go to a team meeting. And so we drove from here to Baton Rouge. So we're sitting in this meeting, and there's this guy in this wheelchair who has Lou Gehrig's disease. And he can't go because he's in bad shape. So, but he was a funny guy, and he's kind of the quartermaster of this group. And he's been several times to this church. And he said, you boys from Texas, come here. And so he says, you got your car here? Yeah, yeah. He said, well, come over here, back your car up to mine. So we back it up, and he opens his trunk, and there's all these name brand tools. He says, these are not Harbor Freight tools because they can't get anything fixed down there. This is high quality stuff. You're going to take it down there and you just leave it. I said, wow. And he loaded us up with $2,000 or $3,000 worth of DeWalt drills and stuff like that. Load us up. I thought, how the heck are we going to get this in our bags? But you can put your underwear and your socks in the paint bucket with all the tools, and that's what we did.
What is something that captures the spirit of Cuba in your mind?
Well, I'll tell you what doesn't capture the spirit of Cuba in my mind, and that's people that go, oh, beautiful beaches, pina coladas on the beaches. And we've just discovered so much more, such a richness there. What impressed me when we went together in May of last year was the Methodist Church is so alive and well in Cuba. We had the opportunity to go to the seminary there, and there are satellite seminaries all across the island. I think there were about 32 total seminaries. And then helping to build this church, and our church having such a big hand in it. And the night of dedication, when I guess that would have been February the 8th of this year, seeing all the district superintendents in attendance, I bet there were about 15 that were there that Friday night with spouses plus the bishop. And it was just good to see our connectional church in another country, and the big hand that our home church had in it.
That's beautiful.
And I think the big thing everybody thinks about, and the first thing that struck us when we got off the plane in Havana in 14 were the old cars. I mean, they're just everywhere in Havana. And to me, the spirit of Cuba is the old cars and the music. We went to the old Havana Hotel that night and just wandered around the grounds, and you could hear that typical Cuban beat going in the background, and somebody was singing, and it was really a cool time to look at it. And what a warm spirit. The other thing that struck me is when we walked into the church and met I guess you call it their worship committee, or they call it the junta, their group of leaders. They're all young. There weren't very many old people at all, in their 20s and 30s, and there's no color barriers. They could be dark, light, it didn't seem to matter. And it never seems to matter in modern day Cuba. So to me, that was the thing that spoke to me.
Theirs is a simple life, but they're joyous about it. they're not burdened by the things that we don't think of as burdens. But after being there a while, I can see we are burdened at times by things. For instance, this past trip in February, no air conditioning, don't really need air conditioning. So every morning about 5 o'clock, the roosters started crowing, and then you hear the clip clop of horses' hooves. And one of the things that struck me when I saw the finished church for the first time was, where's the parking lot? Parking's a big deal. And then I thought, oh yeah, there are 400 members in this church, and there are only 4 cars in the entire congregation. So this time, instead of staying at a hotel a couple of miles from the church, we were a block and a half from the church, very much in a neighborhood. And so in the evenings when we leave the church to go back to our little apartment, people were out on the streets. They were talking to each other. There was a park on the corner also. And so you'd see people gathered out in the park. That was one of the few places where you could get internet. So there were a lot of people that had gathered there just so they could be on their cell phones and communicate with others. So, they appreciate each other, and they're not sad that they don't have all the things that we do. Supplies are very difficult there. What struck me was how precious a spiral notebook and a pen was. I bet I carried a couple of pens in my bag that I had with me all the time. And the church members, do you have a pen? Do you have a pen? I'm like, here, take this one, take this one. And I think about at home that we have a whole shoebox full of pens, and they're nothing to us, but they were precious to them. And then I think about being at school and how much notebook paper there is, how many spiral notebooks there are. And we just take things like that for granted, but they're so appreciative of anything like that. So they're not able to get a lot of supplies, but that's all to say they're so inventive, and they figure out how to do things without all the things that we have.
It's a country of innovation, that's
It
for
is.
sure.
You've kind of referenced it, right? Our church has now built, through not just y'all, but through a team of our church members going, and not just the ones who went, but also those who have given things to go. We've built this partnership with a church in Cuba. What's its name? Where is it? How do you get there? And just give me like a little snapshot, almost if you could take a quick picture of the church. What does it look like?
It's a new building, a stucco building.
It's modern.
Mm-hmm.
Very,
It
very
is.
contemporary building.
Bright red, and of course it's got the Methodist cross and flame on it. In fact, that was one of the beautiful things in the sanctuary. The pews were made out of Cuban mahogany and cedar, and of course it's native wood, because you're not going to be able to get wood from
No
much
nails.
any-
It's all
yeah.
pegged.
Yeah.
Wooden pegs.
And I remember my dad was in the lumber business, and so back in the 60s, early 60s, he talked about Cuban mahogany and how beautiful it was, and it is beautiful. The church building is very angular, and so this beautiful cross that they had made out of this beautiful mahogany had angles that fit into the roof line and things. It was beautiful.
Yeah, this cross at the altar is probably 20 or 25 foot tall. It's huge. And we met the artist who designed and made this cross, and it's backlit behind with lights. So they really thought about it, and this artist did this together. Because he wanted a picture of me with the artist, I'm pretty sure our donations paid for that cross. I didn't ever get a confirmation, but I'm pretty sure we did. Or we paid for the vast majority of it anyway. But, oh my goodness, it's just absolutely gorgeous. It is a work of art.
And what is the name of the church?
It's the Methodist Church of Ciego de Avila.
And where is that?
Ciego de Avila is dead center in Cuba. If you go from east to west, north to south, you're going to be within 50 miles of that. That's where Ciego is. It's the central province. It's also Ciego de Avila. And so the reason it's so important to the bishop and to the Methodist Church, this is the halfway mark when preachers, ministers are going to Havana, where the main seminary is, and they go across the island. That's about an 8-hour drive from Havana to Ciego, and also all the way over to Guantanamo. And that eastern side of the island, it's an 8-hour trip. And the roads get a little poorer the further east you go out of Havana. The roads are really good, by the way. But it's a place, and the reason we built this mission center before they built the new sanctuary is they needed a place for these pastors to get a nice meal, a hot meal, and a good clean bath. And so there's dormitories in there that they're fixing up. And our church supplied all the bedding and the sheets and the linens and the towels for the new dormitory, and we took those with us when we went. So actually we only took 10 sets, and they're going to need 20 because he's putting bunk beds in. So anyway, but we've made a great start on that, and so that's why it's been all the VIM teams from last year, they send one a month, and I bet 8 of them went to Ciego this last 2 years.
And two things. Back to what does the church look like? Like I said, there's not really a need for a lot of air conditioning. So all the big windows were open. There were glass doors on the very front entrance, but then up at the altar, there was a side door that it was open all the time. So it's this wonderful breeze that blows through the church all the time, and you just can't help but feel God's Spirit there, through the breeze. The second thing is, our church has a very, very big part in this, but we're not the only church involved. It's the Louisiana VIM teams and also a church from Fort Walton Beach, Florida. So the thing is, it's been a beautiful job of empowering the Ciego Church to do what they can. So yes, they have put in so much, sweat equity, I think, is the name of it, and their financial abilities too have gone into this. So I would say there's probably about 4 big slices of pie in this.
So if you look at the property on the street, you first see the sanctuary, and then behind the sanctuary is an open area that they want to eventually build a connecting wing to the mission center. That's what I worked on in 2014. We did all the electrical installation there, but that's a 3-story building that's behind the sanctuary. And the sanctuary has a balcony at the front, I guess you'd call it, toward the street, and the altar's toward the back of the property. And then beside that, the Shalimar Church in Fort Walton Beach bought the pastor house. So the pastor lives on property. It's a beautiful 2-bedroom, 1-bath house with a outdoor laundry room in their patio area. And then behind that is a 2-car garage, and they hold their children's Sunday school above and a youth Sunday school room beside in the garage. And also the pastor's office is back there. It's really, really nice. So that's the layout of the property.
And I have to mention the mango tree. When we were there last May, this huge mango tree just umbrellas the property between the mission center and the sanctuary and the pastor's house. And the mangoes, about that big or more, every time one would drop from the tree, it hit this tin roof that was like their main sanctuary at that time. And we would all jump because it sounded like a gun was going off or something. Well, in February when we went there, the mangoes were about as big as your thumb. I mean, there were thousands on the tree. So I had to throw in about the mango tree. That's a big part of the property too.
Tell me a story that captures the spirit of the church.
I've got to say a couple of things, I guess. One is the they have a very evangelical worship experience there. It's not like, the hands are going up. People are actually jumping as they sing, and you feel that enthusiasm and that overwhelming power that just permeates. But then they also have an altar call that they do, and when people come up for that, uh, watch out because it is amazing. They will actually, he blows in their face and says something to them. I don't know if he's chasing the devil out or putting the Holy Spirit in, maybe a little bit of both, but they'll actually fall backwards and convulse on the floor. And it's this incredible power. It is not hokey, it's not made up. Some people fall down and you can sense that it's real. Others just don't quite get there and they don't do that, which to me makes it more real. So it was a very powerful moment. To me, that captures the spirit for me.
It's when I think of that church, I think of like maybe 4 men's faces that come to my mind. And there's, of course, Pastor Andres. And I have never felt like when he praised, and then there was a time in May at the Sunday service where he put his hands on us, and you can just feel power and strength. Then there's a man named Ramon, and Ramon takes care of the church. He is there all the time. His wife was the main kitchen helper that did all the food for us. She's a doctor and took off a week's vacation to come cook for us when we were there in May, and she was back again
And
in
her specialty
February.
is tropical diseases.
So Ramon takes care of the finances of the church, and he's just there all the time. He's the pastor's right-hand man. And then there was a man named Reuben, and Reuben was one of the soldiers in the presentation that we did. And when I first saw Reuben, he's scary looking. I mean, he's broad-shouldered and real buff and very serious looking, and probably I would say maybe 40-ish, maybe mid-40s. He's intimidating, I think is the word that I would use for that. But as I got to know Reuben, he was more soft and more gentle. And at the Sunday service, when pastor was praying over these people, and these people joined and accepted God's Spirit and Christ, and the breath was blown into them, Reuben was standing right behind these 3 young men, ready to catch them should they fall or faint or convulse or whatever kind of physical reaction happened. So I thought, he's like a protector. And so the word protector came to my mind when I thought about Reuben. And this past February when we were there, the open door that I was talking about at the altar, Reuben stood in the open door, and his shoulders almost touched either side of the door opening, and he had that stern look on his face. And the church does have to worry some about the government coming in and shutting it down, and I just knew that we were going to be protected because Reuben was there. And the other young man played John the Baptist in the presentation, and he's about half of Reuben's age, and he was right there at Reuben's shoulder the whole time. And so I just think it's the faces of the people that pop out when I think about that. And then there was Vivian, who cleaned the church, and she dusted all the pews before the Friday night opening, and she asked about Lorna. So it was like, Lorna. And then the little girl that was Lorna's right-hand friend was right there by us too. And, you'll never forget her face and her smile. And so that's what comes to mind, are the people's faces.
And mine is Aliandis, the drummer.
Yeah.
When I was there in 14, I gave him my watch, and I did not know at the time, but he had just lost his father. And so there he is, basically, a young man in need of something, and he has a home in his church, being this drummer, and he's still drumming. 5 years later, he's now 20 years old, and anyway, our church took a cymbal. And when we got the cymbal, he immediately unwrapped it and put it on the drum set. And I grabbed my camera, and when I did, Roxy said, "You missed it." And I said, "What?" He said, "He bent down and kissed that cymbal." And that just warmed my heart. So we did some good.
Roxy, you told me a story about the Spirit of God there and then coming back to our church the next Sunday. Would you tell me that story again?
Okay, remind me how okay. So that was just the Spirit in the worship service, and I go back to one of the pictures with people's hands raised and everything, and feeling the Spirit in Pastor Andre's prayers, seeing it on the people's faces, hearing it in the music from their music team, which was led by Pastor Andre's wife. You were just wrapped around it, and all the hands raised and faces lifted. So I thought, where is it in our church? How do we see it in our church? So we get back that Sunday afterwards, and I think, am I going to feel the same Spirit here? And Daniel started his sermon and was talking about going to the Wednesday evening service and how he was asked to do a devotional or something to sing. He was asked to sing, and so he said, "Well, what do I need to sing? How's it going to fit in with Betty Cook's sermon that's going on?" And Vance, that had asked him, said, "I don't know how it's going to fit in. I don't know what she's talking about." And Daniel said, "Well, I'll just leave it to God." And so he began singing, "Here I am, Lord, it is I, Lord. I will go, Lord, if you lead me. I will hold your people in my heart." And I thought, yes, the Spirit is here. Our spirit comes to us, God's Spirit comes to us, I think, more in a quiet, contemplative type, but it's still there, and it's the same Spirit. And I'm not a hand raiser, in the service, but as Daniel was singing that in the Sunday worship service, I felt my hand go up a little bit here, and I thought, you got to raise it. You just got to raise it, and it went on up during that song, because it's just that kind of a song.
What kind of impact has this partnership had between our church and this church in the dead center of Cuba?
Is it okay if I
start? It's huge, but you go ahead.
It is huge, and I just got there on that Friday when the service was starting, and I saw the church will hold about 400 people, and I saw the bottom row filled. We had a pew reserved for us with some of the district superintendents and Pastor Andre's mom, and so we were there up at the front, and I turned around and looked around, and it was all full downstairs. It was all full upstairs in the balcony, and I looked at the stairway, which was maybe twice a normal size stairway to go up, and the stairway was packed. And I thought, oh my gosh, this is a big deal. And then I looked out at the driveway, and there were more people watching on a big screen what was going on inside, sitting on those old wooden pews that they used to use, benches. And there were more outside than there were in the church. And then I saw the women in their long dresses and beaded jackets, like come up on a bicycle. And, they give their best every time. And I think it's just, my jaw dropped, and all I could think of is, this is a big deal. And it's not just a big deal for the community, it's a big deal for the Methodist Church, because this was the first church building that has been built since the 1960s. And the other big deal was, usually it takes 20 to 25 years to build a building in Cuba. It took 2 years and 9 months for this one to be constructed. And then looking at the pews, it was all our church members' names on those brass plaques. And I looked around and I saw the communion ware, I saw the symbol on the drum set, and the other thing that the district superintendents were in awe of were the 4 microphones that we brought.
Oh.
Normally you can't get more than one
Yeah.
across the border. You know, you get stopped at customs and they confiscate more than one
They were
microphone.
amazed that we could bring those
I don't know how we got
microphones
them
in.
there.
How'd y'all bring those here? All the district superintendents were gathered. How did you get them here? I just put them in my suitcase. So anyway, they were very appreciative of the quality that you picked out and also the number that we brought. Had no idea that was not allowed. But additionally, we took 10 Bibles, kind of an afterthought. I thought we need to take some English, Spanish Bibles down there. So we're sitting there at the beginning of the service, and I see these Bibles appear, and the bishop's writing something in the Bible, and then they called some workmen up, and they gave them a towel and thanked them for their work on the church. And then they brought 3 people up that I'd never seen before, and they presented these Bibles, and I kind of got a little of it, but not a whole lot of it. And it turned out those were 3 government officials, and they gave them Bibles that our church donated. I was really proud that our church made that donation, and they gave those people who've never been to church. You could tell by the way I kind of watched them during the service. They didn't know when to stand, when to sit, and they didn't know any of the words to the songs, and you could tell they were not comfortable in that situation, but they participated to some degree, and you never know.
Is there anything you want this church, First United Methodist Church Cleburne, to know or to say?
Just here again, just to realize what a big deal this was, and it just made me feel, it warmed my heart, to see what a big part our church has. And it's not like we went out and said, we need to start a global missions project, let's do this, let's do that, let's make sure we get across the ocean and to another country and all that. And it just happened. I think about the Experiencing God curriculum that we did like 20 years ago or so, and we found where God was working and joined him.
And I think it's important that we have strived not to present what we think they need. We ask them what they want and then try to join with them in that program. And I think that's very important, that we're doing what they want to do. And he expressed to me, we were talking about youth mission trips, and he says, my goal is to take my youth on a mission trip to another country, maybe somewhere in South America or Central America or something. But he really wants to lead his group on a mission trip. I thought, golly, we could join him in that. Anyway, that would be a lot of fun because they've got a great group of kids. I love their kids. So
I love it.
And I think too, about our mission statement and how it fits in with that, and how we're helping to empower the Ciego Church to do the same thing. Thank you, First United Methodist Church of Cleburne, Texas, for being the hand of God and reaching out and touching and empower other Methodists to be the hand of God.
Thank you, First Methodist, for participating in this mission, in this outreach of our community, and reaching out and helping these people. And just remember that you receive more than you give when you do these programs, because it's just been wonderful. Thanks.